Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Hello, this is Philip Kinsella, and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello and welcome to the show. Thank you for that, Philip. Right, now I'm going to do a Scottish call out today. I've got three Scottish friends I'm going to give a call out today. Malcolm Robinson, although he lives in Hastings, East Sussex, UK. James Francis Welsh, Glasgow, Scotland, UK. And Alison Dunlop, Glasgow, Scotland, UK. Thought I'd make it a Scottish special today. Right, now the guest I've got today is Mike Covell. He's a very prolific writer and researcher. I'm amazed with the amount of books and research, and he seems to be everywhere in everything. So I'm going to waste no more time and invite Mike on, and welcome Mike to the show.
Hello.
Oh, hello, there you are. Hello, Mike. I thought I was on my own again for a minute. How you doing? You all right?
I'm all right, thank you. Thank you.
As I say, welcome to the show, in case you missed that bit. But you're a very prolific writer, and you live in Hull, don't you? Which is East Yorkshire, for our world friends out there. And you're involved in much research in the paranormal, as well as the Jack the Ripper murders, which you've very prolifically written about, hasn't you? What you've done. I've got a big list of books in front of me here that you've been involved in, and Haunted Magazine. I think you've been involved in TV documentaries and things like Most Haunted and stuff like that. So
yeah.
I don't know what your main sort of what you'd like to start and talking about, but let's start. How did you get into the paranormal in the first place? That's probably the best place to start, isn't it?
Yeah, UFOs. When I was 8 years old, I saw a light in the sky over Eastville, and it looked like an egg. And I told my dad about this the following day, and my dad gave me this big booklet, and it was a book called The Unexplained. But what it was I don't know if you remember, David, in the 80s there was like a magazine that came out called...
Yeah, I had all those. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you put them all together. It was the first book of that. And as an 8-year-old boy, I struggled to lift it up. You know, it was heavy.
I'll say I had it. I've got a set.
Yeah, I've got my dad's set. So that was it really. I'd read this copy of Unexplained which was about UFOs, and it was a flow chart.
Yeah.
You basically described what you'd seen and follow the flow chart down. And it came to the conclusion that it was, possibly a weather balloon or a helicopter, but there was a possibility that it could be a UFO. And I just thought, wow, what, and I just started reading this book, and I remember I finished the first volume within a couple of days and said to my dad, can I have the second one off the shelf? And I ended up reading through the full set, just got hooked, and from that age, my dad would say to me every year, what do you want for Christmas? Do you want to buy, And
UFO.
yeah, can you get me some UFO books or some UFO VHS videos? And I just started collecting from there, really. Yeah. And I was always interested in, like, the big international events. But then as I grew a lot older, it was more local for me. I started to get heavily involved in... I joined the Hull UFO Society back in the 90s. and that was when I first met Chris.
Yeah, well, that's the nice thing about it, because you do meet local friends and people that are interested in the same things you are, don't you? You know.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. It was my dad, actually. My dad had seen the advert in the paper and said, oh, there's a new society forming called Hull UFO Society. Why don't you go down? And I went down and first time I met Chris Evers, and we've been mates ever since.
Oh, Chris Evers, what was to explain, is that he runs the OLM, the Outer Limits magazine, for anyone that is not sure who Chris Evers is. And he's got a program on this network as well, the Outer Limits show. Oh yeah, that UFO you saw, Mike, was it an orange one?
It was white. It was like bright white.
Because you described, because the one I saw was an orange oval object in about 1967, I think it was, going across the night sky. And it led me to go and find over the last few years, find a book about orange oval objects, and there's loads of them being seen. So, because it was quite large in the sky, you know. But anyway, this is your show anyway. Don't talk about my one.
Yeah, no. I mean, I found it fascinating. You know, I spoke to other people that have seen similar things across the UK and around the world, and a lot of the research I do is in the local, regional, and national archives. And I look for stuff like this, you know, and I found numerous reports of people seeing these egg-shaped craft all over for many, many years of sightings, you know. And I found them fascinating, you know, stuff like that I just found really interesting.
Well, I mean, you talk about an egg shape. I mean, I suppose if it turned on its side, it could look like you get a cigar shapes as well, don't you? And I think an egg type shape, if it was like a flatter craft, it would look like a cigar, you know, the common cigar shape as well that we hear about. So, it's like my one, the one I saw, it was oval, but if it turned on its side, it could be flat, you know, so it's,
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I've just been researching a case out in the countryside, not far from where I live. And it's going back a few years to sort of 1998 time. I was chatting to a gentleman who'd seen, it was packed up in a lay-by, and he'd seen like an egg. But he was underneath it. And he said as it approached, it looked like a flat object as it approached him, but as it got overhead, it looked like an egg from underneath. And then he said as it flew off, the back end looked flat with lights on it. And he came forward.
As I say, that's the trouble. You don't know what perspective you're looking at it from normally, do you? These objects.
Exactly, yeah. So his sighting was really interesting as well, because within the area where he was, within weeks of his sighting, a number of crop circles appeared. And and it was published in the newspapers at the time. Because he sort of said to me, if you go to the newspaper files and look through the archives, you'll find, because all these reports ended up in the newspaper. And I went to the archives and spent about a month looking through all these newspaper reports. Because he just sort of said it was the summertime around about 1998, which is like, it's not really, it's quite open-ended, is that statement. And I looked through all the newspaper reports and found 3 or 4 newspaper reports on crop circles, 3 or 4 reports on UFO sightings, all at the same time in the same sort of geographical area. So that was really interesting.
Well, it does seem to be a very active area up where you are, doesn't it?
It does. There's a lot. It's weird. There's a lot going on in this area. I mean, if you go through the National Archive, Ministry of Defence UFO files, you know, just type in East Yorkshire or Humberside as it was known in the late 70s, early 80s, you'll just find hundreds and hundreds of reports, you know, from police officers, and, you know, it's not just sort of local people on the street. You know, there's actually what you'd call qualified eyewitnesses, you know, that have seen.
Yeah.
You know, there's some really interesting one. There was one a couple of years ago at Salt End, which is a big plant, big industrial site on the outskirts of Hull. And this was spotted by several police officers. And they dispatched the Humberside police helicopter. There were 6 and 7 officers in 6 and 7 different geographical locations, all radioing each other saying where this thing was, and they all went to look for it. And they could all see it from ground level, but when the helicopter got up, the helicopter couldn't see it. And this left a massive paper trail because they wrote letters to the MOD, asking if it was anything to do with them. You know, and it left a massive paper trail in the National Archives. It's really interesting, but all the names of the police officers are blacked out, so you can't find out who anyone is.
Really? Oh, right. So you can't sort of follow up on somebody.
I've tried freedom of information requests and all sorts, and just keep meeting with the sort of brick wall on that one. But it's the same with, there were stories years ago that Humberside Police was sent to Rendlesham. There was a story, I think it was in Georgina's book, You Can't Tell the People. She'd written that Humberside Police were dispatched to Rendlesham, some of the top-ranking officers. And I was given a name of a police officer, and I went to the archives, and I was told that I couldn't look at his paperwork or his logbook. I wasn't allowed to see anything like that because there was a closure ruling on it. So that was quite interesting. And at the same time, Sir Patrick Wall was an MP for our region, and he stood up in the Houses of Parliament and asked them questions on Rendlesham. And his archives are open. You can go and sit in the History Centre and you can read through all that stuff.
Right. It's quite a way away, isn't it, Hull to Rendlesham? I mean, because Rendlesham's my neck of the woods in Suffolk. It's quite a way away. Why would they be coming down to Rendlesham, I wonder, from Hull?
Well, there's a story, and according to this story, a week before Rendlesham, a gentleman was walking through a park in Hull when he saw what he thought was a tent. It was all illuminated, and he went over to it, and the following morning he woke up and he was at home.
Oh.
And he reported this to the police, and the police took his interview and things like that, and the police went to the site, and according to him, they found burn marks in the grass, and stuff like this. So he seems to think there was already sort of a landing in Hull that might be linked to this Rendlesham affair.
I see.
And he told me this story and said, check it out. And then I'd read in Georgina's book the story that Humberside Police was involved. And it was just really weird. I went to the archives and they were sort of saying, you can't look at this book.
I have got and read that, but I can't remember that bit. Let's have a look. But it's quite interesting, though. Amazing. So your interest that got you into it was UFOs, but I know you've done an awful lot of writing about Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack the Ripper seems to have taken on a kind of this is a paranormal show, but Jack the Ripper has kind of taken on a paranormal, ambience about it. Do you not think as well?
Yeah, it has. I mean, in recent years, there's been a number of sort of paranormal TV shows, Most Haunted being one, where they tried to investigate Jack the Ripper and his victims. I know the lovely Derek Okora on several occasions has tackled it in several books and several documentaries. And there was even a book that came out called The Psychic Investigation that tried to use star charts and things like that and the Zodiac to ascertain who Jack the Ripper was. So there is quite a big sort of paranormal link between the two. One of the people that really interests me is a guy called Robert Donson Stevenson, and Stevenson was born in Hull in the 1840s, and he used to write ghost stories, but he was also heavily involved in esoteric subjects like theosophy. He was involved in occultism. He wrote articles for newspapers and magazines about the occult and the dark arts and black magic and all this kind of stuff. And he had his own theory that Jack the Ripper was killing people to become invisible. And he'd written to the press and give this theory to the press. He'd written to the police and give this theory to the police. And nobody really took him seriously. And then another gentleman came forward and said, well, maybe Robert Donson Stevenson's Jack the Ripper. He knows so much about the guy, maybe it is him. And in later years, Alistair Crowley wrote a book, and in the book he accused Robert Donson Stevenson of being Jack the Ripper. So there's all these little links with all these little people in history that are all linked to the paranormal as well. But yeah, I mean, the case is fascinating. Essentially what you've got at the core of it is 5 poor women that have been brutally murdered in the East End of London, but it's almost gained a mythical aspect. That someone was telling me the other day that there's you can buy computer games and play as Jack the Ripper. Or you can play as a detective trying to track Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And it's got to the point now where kids think that Jack the Ripper was a fictional character. They think he was like Sherlock Holmes and things like that.
Yeah.
I go to secondary schools a lot because it's on the syllabus in secondary school. And I teach the kids about Jack the Ripper in secondary schools. And it's amazing the kind of preconceived notions they have about the case. You know, he walked around with a top hat and a Gladstone bag, and he had a big long flowing cloak and stuff like that. And, you know, when you point out that actually none of the eyewitnesses saw anything like that at all, the kids are shocked.
Yeah.
They're like, well, we've read a comic where he's dressed like that, but it's a comic, you know, it's not necessarily, it's not real. So yeah, it's become this kind of fictional anti-hero, when in actual fact what he did was quite sinister and gruesome.
Oh,
and,
absolutely,
you know,
yeah. One of these suspects I remember hearing about was that he could have actually been somebody working at the local abattoir, and he used to walk around with a leather apron, so nobody would suspect that he's got blood all down his aprons, that nobody would suspect that he's the killer. But that's just one of the theories, isn't it?
There's something like 300 suspects to date, and it goes from the quite serious to, you know, like you say, that workers in the abattoirs and stuff like that, mortuary assistants, doctors, actual people that have served time for murder and serious offences, all the way down to really silly stuff like Queen Victoria, Lewis Carroll, you know, stuff like that. And it seems every week someone comes forward with a new theory. You know, and I just think it's crazy, you know, the amount of suspects we've got.
Yeah. How do you feel about, remember that, you sort of, I think we had a chat about this, that the one of the American series about the American Ripper. How do you feel about that one?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because H.H. Holmes as a murderer is a fascinating subject.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got quite a lot of books on H.H. Holmes, but as the Ripper, one of the arguments was that the handwriting of his handwriting and the Ripper's handwriting in the letters was the same. But back then we used copperplate writing, so children were taught in school to write in a certain way. So a lot of the handwriting was the same. And the other point in as well, H.H. Holmes, there's no evidence of him ever coming to the UK. There's no passenger manifests, nothing like that. Did they not find some sort of a link that he might have used a relation's name or something to come over? I mean, that's one of the theories, but they can't prove it. You know, you could argue that it was the relation that came over.
Yeah.
So, I mean, another one as well is, at the time, his wife was pregnant. She got pregnant in September. You know, if he's supposedly in Whitechapel killing people, how did she get pregnant on another continent? So, you know, it don't quite ring true. And I think what's happened there is that you know, this guy's an interesting character, and people are trying to sort of linking him with other stuff as well. And the show was great, but there was a lot of sort of conjecture and leaps of faith and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, for the serious historian, when you're studying stuff like that, you look for the primary sources, you look for this kind of stuff, and you can use that to rule people out. You know, if you know where these archives are kept, you can go to them and find names and you know, things like that. And it's happened so many times, and it's kind of like it's like water off a duck's back. You know, people come forward with a theory and you kind of roll your eyes and sort of sit down and say, go on then, and then they tell you the theory, and then you'll find, you know, within an hour or so, people are already pulling away at it and trying to find evidence to back it up or to disprove it.
Yeah.
Which, again, paranormal, I guess.
Yeah.
The same sort of things with the paranormal. A lot of the locations I've researched, people have come forward and said this property's haunted because this happened and this happened and this happened. But when you go to the archives to look for evidence of that, there's no evidence to back up the claims, you know. I guess ripperology is a lot like that. People are always looking for the evidence for or against.
I say the show was very interesting, but I suppose you're right. At the end, it was kind of a was it or wasn't it type of thing, wasn't it? It did sort of leave it kind of up in the air, although he seemed to be very convinced. I can't think of his name. Jeff. God, I can't think of his name. Anyway, but it was a very interesting program. But I mean, I'll tell you, going back to the UFOs again for a minute. You mentioned about crop circles that were appearing. What do you think? What's your take on crop circles generally?
Well, The thing is, I mean, at the time that was happening, there was 2 local colleges, and the story was that the students of each college, they were kind of at like war with each other. And one of the stories that came out at that period was that all these crop circles seemed to be found near Bishop Burton. And Bishop Burton is the home of the Bishop Burton Agricultural College. And it was claimed that students from another college was regularly going over to Bishop Burton and leaving crop circles close to their college. And it was kind of a tit for tat thing. And the story came out a few years ago. There was a guy who came, I guess you could call him a seriologist, a researcher of crop circles came, and he'd gone to these colleges and spoke to people, and this story came out that it wasn't, at the time it wasn't related to UFOs, it was more related to students trying to get one up over the other college.
I see.
But then the problem with that is in these newspaper reports, you had all these eyewitnesses saying that they'd seen these craft flying about at the same time.
Right.
So it is interesting. I'm not quite sure. I've not really got to the bottom of it. And the sad thing is as well, I mean, this happened in sort of 96, 97, 98. So all these locations now have had years of growth on them. So we can't really analyse anything. There's nothing left, which is a big shame.
See, what I find is that you do see there's so many crop circles that appear all, kind of all over the world now, isn't there? And, are they all fake? I just don't, the way I see it, they can't all be fake, but then you just don't know. I suppose it depends how many fakers there are out there.
Yeah, I mean, I remember years ago, going back to sort of 1998, 1999, there was crop circles appearing down south that were massive, and they had sort of, one of them looked like the strand of DNA and stuff like that. I mean, that kind of stuff's impressive.
And very, very complicated ones, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if people are going to fake them, that is fantastic. There's some amazingly talented people. And I watched quite a few documentaries where they've got students to make them overnight using bits of rope and bits of wood on string and all this sort of stuff. And they didn't quite look the same as some of the formations that we're seeing, all over, like you said, all over the world,
And that's what you think. I mean, in the dead of night, to do a really complicated design like that, and you can't really see what you're doing. I must have all these bright lights and things so you can see what you were doing. And you'd think they'd get spotted by the farmers or whatever, wouldn't you?
Exactly, yeah. And many of these circles as well, there's little trace of anything leading to or from them. You'd think if there was a big group of hoaxers, they'd leave some sign that they've been on the field. When we go out researching Cold War bunkers and stuff like that, it's very difficult to get to them without having a right of way across land. So we check with the landowners, and the farmers always say to us, move around the edge of the field until you get to the particular point, and then try and cut in. They call them tram lines, but where the tractors basically go through the field, walk through that until you get level with it. Otherwise you'll damage the crop.
Yeah.
And it's quite easy to accidentally stand on these, on the corn.
Sure, yeah.
And it bend and it'll crack and it just, it'll leave a mark where you've been really. But yeah, so it's weird that there's no traces in some of these formations.
Yeah, you imagine all these people stumbling around in the dark, and not getting lost where they are as well, because quite often these crop circles are actually quite out of the way. They're not sort of right on top of a road or anything, are they? It's... Yeah,
exactly. And some of them have happened near places like Stonehenge and Silbury Hill, places that have a lot of tourists going through them. So you'd think they maybe would have seen, people working through the night on such a thing.
I say I'm a little bit open on that. I mean, I used to believe that they were, well, I don't know about all of them, were sort of real, but I can't rule them all out. That's the problem. You kind of think to yourself, well, maybe quite a lot of them are fake, but there are other ones that are not. I don't know where to take it really. But,
I think one of the best theories I ever heard was a fair few years ago, and I can't remember where it was that had put this theory. Who it was that had put the theory forward, but they reckoned it was hedgehogs in some sort of mating ritual running around in circles. And I just thought that was so funny. That to me is weirder than sort of flying saucers coming in.
Yeah, I mean, making all those amazing patterns, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So,
because you've actually wrote a book called The UFO Files as well, haven't you?
Yeah, but I mean, that one is based on stuff that's happened in Hull. So that one was basically a look at the National Archives files, the local and the regional archives files, and local sightings, all within the boundary of Hull. And I mean, that took a fair few years to work on, as you can imagine. Like going through all the files is time consuming as it is, and it's really great because it's opened up quite a lot of doors. I've had quite a lot of people contact me with other sightings and added to some of the stories that are in there. And it brought forward as well a lot of sightings that were known locally with local groups, but never really published nationally. So there was this new research in there in a sighting that took place over Anlaby, where a gentleman, a little boy, was out playing with his friends at playtime at a school, and he claims to have seen this craft. And the craft landed on top of the school, and men got out the craft. And I managed to track down one of his classmates, and he sort of said to me, the guy's still in Hull, but he refuses to talk about it because he still genuinely believes that he saw something up there that he's quite worried about. So that was an interesting case. I also researched one based at Warne, which is on the outskirts of Hull, which is a little village. It's home to a massive Cold War bunker. But some school children had seen a craft flying over the school, and the children were all taken into separate rooms and given plasticine and asked to recreate what they'd seen, and all the children recreated the same object. That was interesting. It was mentioned briefly many, many years ago in 14 Times. That's where I remember reading about it, but not a lot of research was done into it. So when I got hold of that, I tracked down the school and spoke to people at the school, tried to contact the former students, and spent a lot of time and researching that. Just recently, I was in the National Archives and I found a series of eyewitness reports from a place called Branzome, which is a big housing estate on the outskirts of Hull. In fact, Chris Evers will tell you himself that as a young lad, I think he had his first UFO sighting over Branzome. And I managed to track down a series of sightings from the 1970s where 3 independent eyewitnesses on Branzome had seen a craft that was described as like a cone-shaped craft. It was silver, made no noise, and it flew through the sky. And the interesting thing about this in the National Archives, the first time I came across the files, all the names were redacted. They were all black. So you couldn't see any of the identities of all the eyewitnesses. The second set of files I went through, no one had bothered. No one must have read them, and all the names was visible. So I took down the names of all the eyewitnesses, all the police officers, and started making inquiries. And I managed to track one of the witnesses down. And it was really funny because he wouldn't speak to me directly. He would only speak through a mutual friend. So we had this really amusing backwards and forwards conversation. And he admitted he'd seen this craft. He said in hindsight, it was probably an aeroplane. He was only a young lad. So he just put 2 and 2 together and thought it was a UFO. And I said to him, well, look, I've seen these files in the National Archives and it's all in there. And he was really surprised. He was like, no way. I said, yeah. And I sent him copies. I'd copied all these files and sent them to him and said, there you go, here's all the files. And I said, but there's eyewitnesses elsewhere. I found other eyewitnesses. I found one in Lincolnshire, which is right over the river, right over the Humber estuary. They'd seen the same craft the same night, but moments earlier.
Wow.
And when I showed him that, he was like, wow, you know, maybe there was something to it. So, I mean, that one's interesting because that's a single event with mass eyewitnesses. And I've been chasing up a few like that where these big sightings involving numerous people spread right across East Yorkshire and North East Lincolnshire. And they're all reporting the same thing. And we seem to be having a wave at the minute of bright orange lights.
Like the orange again, yeah.
Yeah, we seem to be having lots and lots of them all over East Yorkshire, North East Lincolnshire, all around the Humber. And these are the sort of things where people will report them in Grimsby and Immingham and Cleethorpes, which is over the Humber, that within the hour, they'll get eyewitness reports from Brough, Hessel, Cottingham, you know, all across Hull. So there seems to be something to it. You know, they seem to be moving in a northerly direction and then disappearing out over the North Sea. But we're not sure what they are. No idea.
Yeah, I just recently did a show with Paul Sinclair, who you obviously know quite well, and he's written quite a few good books about. It's all in the same area, isn't it? So
I mean, it's slightly north of where I am, but the Yorkshire coast is quite an active area.
Because a lot of it's all out at sea. He sees, isn't it? The lights out there. They're even going into the sea, apparently, some of them.
Yeah, I mean, he was at the Outer Limits conference where he presented the photograph of looked like a triangle underneath the North Sea. And stuff like that stands out. But yeah, it's a really weird area. And we seem to be getting a lot happening around here. Yeah.
Are you going to be at the next Outer Limits conference?
I believe I'm working. I've got bookings here in Hull, it's quite a busy year this year for me. It's really taken off.
This was in Pontefract, isn't it?
Yeah, just down the road. That was where we shot Most Haunted Live in Pontefract, and we also filmed Paranormal Lockdown there.
Oh, right.
I know the place well.
Yeah, I'll ask you a bit about some of that a bit later. Anyway, I'm going to say to people listening out there, I mean, Mike's got such a vast amount of books that he's done. I mean, when I put them on the Paranormal Dimensions page, you'll see just what I'm talking about. I mean, it's actually mind-blowing, a lot of books he's written. From Jack the Ripper to the UFO files, the Paranormal files, and haunted inns and all sorts of things. But anyway, you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network. This is Paranormal Dimensions, and I'm talking to Mike Covell. I think what we ought to... I know, as I say, you've written so many books, it's hard to know where to jump to next. About the Ghost Files, Mike, I think you've done a couple of volumes of that, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, basically what had happened to me was I was working full-time in retail. I was a manager of a shop. I got married, I had a mortgage, and I got really ill. I got diagnosed with a critical heart condition. I had to give up full-time employment, and I needed a hobby, really, just to keep me busy. So I'd read a few books about ghosts in Hull. And the thing is with these books, they sort of tell you the story, but they don't tell you the history. And I was fascinated by the history side. I thought, well, if this building's haunted by a lady that's died in the building, there should be an historical record of her death.
That's what I like about the Most Haunted programmes, all the history of the places as well that they give you.
So I wanted to find out the history, so I got a list of all these locations and went and checked the history and found that some of the history was not what people was claiming. People were making up history, people were making up stories, and the Ghost Files was really a result of that. And basically what I did was I spent best part of a year researching, spent another year writing, and the book got so big when I submitted it to my publisher. I said, I think we need to split this into two because it's such a big book. It was hundreds and hundreds of pages long. So we ended up having to split that one into the two books. And then he said, how about haunted pubs? There must be some haunted pubs in the area. And just by going to these places and chatting to people and standing at the end of the bar and gathering stories from staff and landlords, and I ended up with loads and loads of places and locations. And I thought, once you've gone and researched the stories, I like to go and research the history. So that led to the Haunted Inns books, and they're really popular. People kind of read them and go around the pubs and stuff themselves on a little pub crawl.
It gives them an excuse, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's different types of spirits, but it's spirits nonetheless. So people will read them and then go to the pubs. The Haunted Homes of Hull, that was a book that I'd been working on for a while, and what had happened with that is I'd started researching a couple of properties that were supposedly haunted, and I'd got a lot of history behind them and things like that. And then I just thought it'd be great to have a volume just of haunted houses and talk about the real history. And places like 39 de Grey Street, and there was a poltergeist on Pennington Street at a haunted house. There was a place on Kent Street where the family was still living in the area, and they'd read an article I'd written about this haunted house, and they got in touch with me, so that was really cool. And it was just a result, basically, of all this research into all these sort of ghostly locations. Then I sort of moved away from ghosts a little bit, and I've always had an interest in cryptozoology. I mean, I love the idea of lake monsters and big cats, and I wanted to write a book about cryptozoology in East Yorkshire. So what I did was I spent quite some time researching big cat sightings, sea serpent reports. There was reports of sea serpents in the Humber. There was reports of sea serpents right up along the Yorkshire coast. There was a giant squid washed up at Witherinsea, which I found fascinating. There's all these reports of all these weird and wonderful animals. And then I started researching that and ended up with quite a lot of material. So much so that I ended up producing that one and then later on another one called The Humber Monster, which was just purely about the Humber Monster. And those stories went viral. People they ended up in the local, national, and then in the international news. And it was really funny because the Humber Monster, the sightings took place in the 1920s and 1930s. This is not like a modern day thing. And when the book was published with the article in the Hull Daily Mail, it went viral and people was getting in touch saying, are you still hunting for it? Well, no, because it took place long before I was born. And one of the national newspapers actually said I was the head of the Humber Monster Watch. And I said, no such organisation exists. And then I had people ringing up asking if they could join the Humber Monster Watch. And I was like, but it's not real. It doesn't exist. These sightings are historical. Nothing's happening now. Not that we know of. So that was really interesting to work on. Another one that was really big was the Beast of Barmston Drain story. And this was in 2015, I started working for the Hull Daily Mail. And I'd go around looking for stories. And basically a friend of mine had seen he said he'd seen a ghostly child on a place called Skullcoats Lane in Hull. And he asked me if I could ask my friends on social media if they'd ever had any weird experiences in that area. And I knew the cemeteries there's 3 cemeteries in close proximity. I knew they'd had previously reports of ghost stories and all this kind of stuff. So I was expecting people to contact me with ghost stories. But in the space of a few hours, I had 5 or 6 eyewitnesses, all independent of each other, saying they'd seen something along Barmston Drain. Now, Barmston Drain is an inner city waterway, and it's basically there to drain the land of water. And it kind of goes all the way from right past Driffield, all the way to Hull City Centre, and it comes out of the River Hull. And people claim to have seen a werewolf. And at the time when I got all these reports and I was shocked. I don't believe in werewolves. But all these eyewitnesses were saying, we've seen something that resembles a man changing into a dog. Well, what else could you call that other than a werewolf, I started researching it, and it was really funny because, how do you research a werewolf?
Yeah.
We was going out like paranormal investigators with cameras and stuff like that. The way the media took a hold of the story, the first story was published in the Hull Daily Mail. I wrote that for them. Within the space of a week, it was in the Nationals. So the Daily Mirror and the Star and the Sun and everybody there was featuring the story. And it was all very tongue-in-cheek. They were saying that residents of Hull are going around with torches and pitchforks, which couldn't be further from the truth. It was essentially a group of students with camera equipment trying to capture this thing on film. And we invited the media to Hull to come and take part in an investigation with us. And the night that we went out, we saw with these green eyes in this bush across the drain. And, if you hold your thumb at arm's length, the eyes were at either side of my thumb. So the head of the creature was big. Yeah. And then another set appeared, and the trees were moving around like there was something in the trees. We had an animal tracker. She didn't know what it was. We had a folklorist who had written a book and featured a werewolf in it. And he came down and he didn't know what it was. And when we turned around, the media had ran off.
Did you pick up any sort of scent or anything in the air?
No, nothing, no smell or anything like that. And when I caught up with the media and said, why did you run? They were really scared. And they actually wrote an article the next day saying, we've been to Hull and we've seen these eyes in this bush and we don't know what it is. And then it got even stranger because Alice Cooper, the rock star, he wrote on his Facebook page that he wanted to come to Hull to investigate. We ended up taking the Travel Channel, Vice TV, the BBC. We took so many camera crews down there looking for evidence, and we found things like the carcasses of animals ripped open. We found rats that were gnawed. We found ducks that had been partially eaten. We found piles of feathers. We found large piles of excrement that looked like human excrement. But the strangest one was one evening we were filming with the Travel Channel. We found a grave in the old cemetery that had been opened, but there were claw marks on the mud around the. I mean, that was weird. And they ended up putting that in a TV show, and that went out in America. So yeah, we found a lot of stuff that on the surface it could all be circumstantial, but when you put it all together, and it is quite compelling, and especially with, I mean, we've got the eyewitness reports going right back to sort of the late 50s. People were reporting stuff in the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. It wasn't just like a recent thing. But I mean, it was fascinating. Still don't know what it is. We're still clueless. We go down there at least once a week and have a walk around and see what we can find. But we found all sorts, you know, and I mean, that was a weird story, that, and like I say, that went viral, and that one was really, really big.
I know when I had Paul on the show, he was mentioning about, a lot of sheep. They don't put sheep on the land anymore up on the top there, because a lot of them, they just kept finding dead sheep everywhere. So there's obviously something going on in the area with some of these creatures, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, with the cryptozoology files, I documented a lot of big cat sightings in the area. These were right around this particular area, but all the eyewitnesses were saying it's not a cat, it's a dog. You know, so that was weird. And historically as well, I even found a story of a dog that was bigger than a wolf, and it turned up on one of the docks in Hull. And it was said to have been responsible for a fireman who fell into the dock and drowned. He'd seen this dog and jumped in to escape from it. And they chased this dog, and it ended up running down the railway track and vanishing. And it just so happens that railway track crosses over Barmston Drain. So, I mean, that itself was quite weird, finding that sort of historical connection.
So overall, what would you say is your favourite subject in the paranormal? Just, you know, is it UFOs, or do you just find the whole thing fascinating?
I just found the whole thing, really, yeah.
You're a bit like me, really. You sort of, everything's kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. I get all the books and sit and read, and I just found it all fascinating. I just found these weird encounters that people have, just, you know, they baffle me and amaze me at the same time. Yeah. And I'm like, I love investigating them. I love spending the night in haunted places, and I've been on scar watches. We've took a boat out trying to look for the sea serpent. We've been looking for big cats in fields and all sorts. So every year we have like a different. I try and get as much in as possible. And my eldest, I mean, he's 15 now, but I've taken him on. I took him out once to try and find a big cat that had been spotted in East Hull, and we found a paw print, and it was bigger than his mobile phone. And I mean, he was really excited at first. Then he kind of got really scared. I said, "What's up?" And he said, "If there's a paw print here, it means that it's crossed here, and if it's crossed here, there's a chance that it could cross back." And you're sort of stood here taking photos and stuff like that. You know, we're stood in the middle of this cornfield, and he's getting really paranoid, and he's looking around, and he's kind of keeping his eye out. And I said, the chances of us seeing him are really slim.
Yeah. Well, you went out there, the thing is, though, you went out there looking for it in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I dragged him along, and I mean, he loves stuff like that. He enjoys it, and they like it as well, because I mean, the kids go to school, and all the school friends are saying to him, "Oh, we've seen your dad on TV, and we've read his, our parents have got his books on the shelf." And I even had an email from a teacher at the school who said they brought the books for the dad and asked me if I could sign them. Yeah,
why not? I mean, like you say, when I put all these books on the site, you'll see just how prolific all this is. It's fantastic. I'm really amazed and you're still a young man.
I don't know about that.
Well, you've still got quite a few years under your belt, I think, to go.
Yeah. I've this year I've submitted 10 new books to the publisher.
Wow, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I mean,
they've not been published yet, so we kind of had a discussion the other day on what book will be published. And at the minute I'm working on the next 10. But yeah, I mean, it's all fascinating stuff, and people love it, and it's really interesting as well, because I do a lot of lectures, and and I travel all over the country doing it, and people come up with stories, and you know, I did one in Nottingham, and I was in Nottingham, which is quite a distance from Hull, and this guy at the end said to me, I remember as a kid living near Barmston Drain, and I remember seeing the carcass of a wolf. And I said, really? And he said, oh yeah. He said, I stood in it. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the carcass was under cover. It was under all these trees. And he was walking through these bushes, and he felt his feet go into something sloppy. And he said, when I looked down, there was a wolf on the floor. And I said, are you sure it was a wolf? He said, I'm positive it was a wolf. He said, I ran back home to my mum and dad, and all they could say to me was, you've got your trainers there. And he said, they wouldn't listen to me. And I found that fascinating. All the miles away from Hull, that this guy had once lived in Hull and experienced something that fit in with all these, you know, Barmston Drain stories. I love stuff like that when you're travelling all over and people are coming up with stories.
Sure, yeah. What are your feelings on things like black magic? Do you think there's any sort of truth in it, or?
Funnily enough, many years ago, a gentleman turned around and he said to me, he was a black magician, or he claimed to have been a black magician, and for all intents and purposes, I think he was a con man. But he once told me that he'd put a black magic curse on me, and I sort of turned around to him and I said, well, you know, it's not really had the effect, has it? My books are doing really well, and you know, people are buying them all over the world, and you know, I've had a bestseller, and I've won awards, and all the TV work and stuff. I said, I don't think your magic's working. But yeah, I mean, for the Paranormal Files, I worked on a case that I published actually in the Hull Daily Mail, and it was about satanic ritual abuse. And the story was that in Hull there was a big circle of black magicians that were messing about with children. And this was a case that was going on from the late 80s right through the 90s. And in the end, there was a number of books written about it, some for, some against. And the police actually, Humberside Police issued a statement saying we don't think any of it's true. We think that basically people have taken all these unconnected stories and connected them. But at one point it got that serious that, do you remember Roger Cook and the Cook Report?
Yeah.
Roger Cook actually mentioned he was going to come to Hull and investigate, and he never did. So it got serious at one point. But yeah, I mean, I found it fascinating.
Well, the thing is that is quite a lot in the news even now, isn't it? All these cover-ups and things that you hear about. And I don't know, a lot of it seems to, I don't know, I find it so scary that this sort of thing can be going on, you know, right sort of under our noses, you know, and the connections that you hear with, that they've got with important people. And, well, even now, there's this thing about the flights, wasn't there, with the slave abductions and things with, that Bill Clinton might have been involved in. It's just,
yeah, I thought that, yeah. I was reading that this morning. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's really scary. I mean, the thing is, all this stuff's been bubbling around for years, isn't it? You know, but it's all been rumour and conjecture. But there seems to be evidence coming out now that a lot of it could be true. You know, when you know, like the Jimmy Saviles of the world, and who would have thought Jimmy Savile, in those, you know, back then, like, they're supposed to be a respected man on the television, and look what he was doing.
Exactly, yeah.
And apparently he's been worse. He's actually worse than what we all think now. You know, so, and the connections he had with government. But
yes.
You know, I suppose we can't go too far down that road, but.
It makes you wonder though, doesn't it?
Oh, certainly, yeah. It certainly makes me wonder. I mean, a lot of it sounds so far-fetched, but when you actually start looking at the things, there's so many connections that you think, well, I mean, David Icke's been talking about this sort of stuff for years. I mean, I don't know if you can believe everything that in David Icke's repertoire, but excuse me, but I mean, a lot of the stuff is actually proven true what he said, but I don't know. I mean, a lot of it's not his own research anyway. It's sort of all compiled, a lot of it, isn't it? But
yeah.
I was saying so I suppose going back to UFOs. How do you feel? I mean, I did a show with Phil Mantle recently about the alien autopsy. Did you? Were you ever taken in by that?
Well, as a young lad, when that first came out, I was just a wee nipper back in the 90s. And I remember watching it on TV. I remember reading about it in the national newspapers at the time. I remember reading all the investigations in UFO magazine that were published at the time. I went out and bought the VHS video with the documentary. And then I went out and there was a double VHS box that had a little bit of extra footage. Excuse me. And then I went out and bought that one as well. And I don't know, it didn't ring true to me. There was just certain aspects that it just didn't, it looked like it was staged. I remember the Ant and Dec movie coming out years later. And it just kind of, I mean, the thing that got me was that years and years ago, I remember reading one of the books on Roswell. It might have been by Randall Schmidt or something like that. But I remember reading this book, and it mentioned that the fingers on these things, they only had so many fingers, and the end of the fingers had these kind of protrusions on them that looked like little sucker cups or something like this. And that just stuck in my mind. And when I watched the autopsy footage, I thought, well, the fingers aren't the same. The fingers are not what's been described. You know,
well, that was done on purpose, wasn't it? Because I've had Spiros on the show, and he did that. He said he did that on purpose to actually make it different to what people reported.
Yeah. So, and I remember looking at that and thinking, oh, it's not the same. You know, and I don't think it's real. I don't think it's genuine. You know, and it's weird that it's suddenly raised its head again. You know, after all these years. And the interesting thing about it is, if you go through the Ministry of Defence files, which are now held at the National Archives, they're open to anyone. You can download them, or you can go into the National Archives and look at them yourself. There's only one document in that full collection of files pertaining to the alien autopsy, and it's the one that Philip Mantle posted the other week, where it's essentially, in the run-up to the autopsy being screened, they were sort of saying, you know, if anyone offers it for sale, don't buy it. People were very cautious about it. And that's it. You'd think if it was genuine, there'd be some discussion. You know, and that doesn't seem to be the case. It almost seems to be like, you know, this is a fraudulent piece of footage. So don't bother getting more.
Yeah. I mean, I got to admit, I was taken in by it. I actually thought at one point it could have been real. Maybe could have been. I was kind of convinced by it, but obviously as time went on, and I saw the presentation by Spiros in London, Spiros Malaris that is, and it was obviously all laid out. I thought, well, it's obviously not true because the way he described it and the way he produced it and everything, you know.
Yeah.
Very clever, obviously very clever, but but the unbelievable thing is that people still believe it's real out there, you know.
They still believe it's real, and they're really passionate about it.
I know.
And, you know, you see the online arguments.
I know, it's quite hilarious.
Yeah.
And then when you get people like Linda Moulton Howe coming out and she's holding up all this stuff, I had tears raining down my face, you know, listening to it. And I thought, how? Why? You know, I just don't get it, you know. You'd have thought that was all put to bed years ago, but there you go. It's quite funny, quite entertaining, really. But I think Spiros is getting pretty fed up with it all. You know? Well,
I think most people are at the minute. There seems to be a core of believers that just keep promoting it.
Yeah.
And it seems that no matter what evidence you come forward with to say that it's fake, they just don't believe it.
No, it's
that's part of the conspiracy. You know, we're all agents of misinformation, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And it's just, you can't really argue with people like that because the man's already set. They've already made.
Yeah, that's it. That's what old Stanton Freebie used to say. Don't bother to try and change my mind. My mind's already made up. or the worst to that effect, anyway. But so what, you got anything planned for the future, Mike? You got any appearances you're going to be making? Because I'd like to try and put a plug on for you and put them on the site, you know.
Yeah. At the minute, I've got, I work for, my company's called Amazing Hull Tours, and we do walking tours every single week. And we do over 40 different walking tours, and everything's pretty busy with that at the minute. I've not got any filming commitments lined up for any new TV stuff. I've had a few offers. I'm quite happy just sort of plodding along at the minute, doing what I'm doing. Like I say, I'm working on some new books. One of them is going to be another UFO book. I've just finished writing a book on 39 Degree Street, which will be for the first time ever, the full history of 39 Degree Street will be laid out for people to read. And it will show that the stories behind the haunting are all false.
Oh, right, really?
And that was, I got the help of Humberside Police, the local and regional archives, and people that had actually lived in the house as well. I spoke to them. So that was really good fun working on that. I've also just finished a book on the Screaming Skull of Bert and Agnes Hall, which is one of my favourite ghost stories as a child. And Bert and Agnes is a beautiful hall, and the story is that there's a screaming skull in there, and when you move it, it screams. And I visited the hall 6 or 7 times and became obsessed with this story. And about 6 years ago, I started collecting all the different versions of the story. And in the end, there was about 300 variations of the story. So I wrote a book about them and how they changed from year to year and where they were being reported at the time. So that one's all finished, and that's with the publisher. The next book I'm due to publish is Haunted East Yorkshire, which is about ghost stories from East Yorkshire. And the idea behind that is that when you pick up books about Yorkshire being haunted, they all talk about York and Whitby, and East Yorkshire rarely get to mention. And what I did with that one is it was like a census of ghost stories. I went from village to village and town to town and spoke to people and landlords and locals and farmers and you name it, and built up a massive picture of ghost stories in the region. And spent a good few years researching and writing that, and it's all ready now. It's all finished. And that's with the publisher. I've also been working on one about the ghost stories in Beverley as well. Beverley's a town on the outskirts of Hull, really historical town, lots of ghost stories attached to it, but there's never really been a decent full-length book on these ghost stories. There seems to be lots of little booklets and things like that. So that's a project I'm working on at the moment. So, I mean, I'm keeping busy.
Oh, it certainly sounds like it. You're a bit mind-blowing, actually.
Yeah. And then I've got, in September, I'm going to Lincoln. There's a literature festival going on in Lincoln. I've been invited over there to talk about my Jack the Ripper research, so I'll be going over there in September.
Amazing. I really take my hat off to you, Mike. It's amazing. I hope I get to see you again at some point. Anyway, I mean, we met briefly in Hull, but you know what these things are like. You don't really get a chance to speak to people, and it's nice that I've had the chance to actually have a good, nice conversation with you on here. But as I say, I'll make sure that all your books get. I mean, you might sell a few more books off this show. You never know, because it does go worldwide. So, so get all your envelopes ready. But I suppose in closing, how did you find your most haunted appearances? Did you enjoy them, or have you got any little stories to tell about it in the last few minutes we've got?
Yeah, I loved it. It was great fun. Yvette is lovely in real life. Yeah. And it was also, they came to Hull to visit a location.
While you're there, any chance you could get her to come on this show? I mean, she is one of my Facebook friends, but I think they're so full of, I mean, perhaps you could drop a line to her and ask her.
Yeah, I can have a word with her and Carl. They're both lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, they came to Hull to visit a location that I was running tours at, and they came on one of the tours, and me and Carl just instantly hit it off. We had a bit of a laugh, and they said, when we come back and film, are you available? I said, yeah, sure. So I ended up on the episode that was filmed at Anison's, the funeral parlour in Hull. And then I did a few events with them, and we just became really close. We talked a lot, and then one day I get a phone call, and it said, would you be willing to come on Most Haunted Live at Halloween? I got to work with Paul O'Grady and Rallan and people like that, and it was such an experience.
They all seem like very nice people as well.
Yeah, well, it was great to film. They really looked after us. They put loads of food on and drink and everything, so it was well looked after. And it was just so nice to be able to work on a show like that. I've watched it for years. You know, I've sat there with my wife over the years watching it, and we've got all the DVDs. So to actually be on it was such a great experience. And then that opened the door for Paranormal Lockdown, like Nick Groff from Ghost Adventures, Sabrina Weedman from Paranormal. I was asked to work on that show. I didn't know what show it was or who I was working with. They sent a driver through to Hull to pick me up and drive me to Pontefract. And when I got there, Nick Groff was waiting.
Oh, right.
So that was a great experience. And Nick's lovely. Nick is such a funny guy. Nick and I still chat on Twitter and stuff like that. We've been talking about some stuff I've been working.
So, in your experience on most talking, I'm sorry, I was just jumping in again. Did you see any sign of them trying to fake anything?
No, nothing like that.
Because you do hear these little stories. Though I don't believe it myself, but you do hear these little stories that there's been a little bit of fakery going on.
Oh yeah, people would say to me, "Oh, look out for this, look out for that, look out for the other." And as someone who's interested in that sort of phenomena anyway, I'm always looking out for things that are going on. And there was no fakery of any sort. You know, nothing was rigged up. What they caught on camera was what actually happened that night. And when you're on set and you can see it yourself, you know for a fact, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was.
That's nice to hear. Actually, I'm glad glad I asked you that question because the
interesting thing as well is they're genuinely interested in the paranormal. They're genuinely interested in reading up. You know, when you talk to them about cases, their eyes light up. They know it. You know, they've done their homework and they've read about it.
Sure.
And I think when you're going into TV shows to see that yourself, it's great. You know, because it puts you at ease, and you know then that the people you're working with, the professionals, and they want the same as what you want, and that's the answers. They want to and find the answers.
Well, I mean, it's been going for quite a few years now, and it's been very successful. And they do come over as very nice. Yvette comes over as really nice, you know. And as I say, I'd love to get her on the show, but whether that'll actually happen, I don't know. If she can put an hour aside sometime, be lovely. But
I'll have a word.
Well, thanks, Mike. I'll really appreciate that if you can. But well, I don't know. I suppose that time's probably up about now. But it's been fantastic to have you on the show, Mike. Perhaps you'll come back on again because you've got with so many books, you've got so many stories you can tell. But it's been lovely talking to you, Mike. As I say, I hope I get to see you again at some point. I'll buy you a beer. Thank you for listening. Please tune in again next week.
Paranormal Dimensions is as bright and powerful as our celestial star, the sun. And although it's expending thousands of pounds of energy every minute of the day, have no fear. There's plenty left.